Hello everyone and welcome to Mrs. Maple's Costuming. So for today's project, I thought, why not make some Regency long stays? Now I'm really excited about these because I am using the red threaded Regency long stays kit. It goes from about 1800 to approximately, or 1805 to approximately 1830 is what the kit is recommended for. But what is really interesting and what I'm hoping to continue forward is throughout this year, have a bit of a creation and making of various stays and corsets throughout the 19th century, so the Regency Victorian era, looking at how they change and their construction changes during this time period, as well as how it affects the silhouette. So with this one starting up, our Regency long stays. To put this into context, the Regency period goes from about 1800 to 1830 approximately, leads into the Romantic era and the Victorian era. Now with the Regency, this is just after the French Revolution, so the old ways of wearing very giant over-the-top garments are completely gone. That's thrown away. The idea then is looking back at a kind of simpler time, which is to say the ancient Greeks, and looking at their ideas of beauty, aesthetics, and using that and being inspired by that to create this clothing. So you've gone from these giant 3-foot tall hairdos for the very wealthy elites and very strong conical stays to a very soft flowing, you have your stays on, but they've completely changed. A lot of them, even short ones, they're almost like a slightly boned sports bra. Like they really just hold it in, but there's not the same support size structure as in comparison to what had been happening. But that's because these dresses are much lighter, and their primary focus is to show off the chest. So they go underneath the chest and then they just drape down. This is where we get the empire waist from. So it's way up high and just drops into a beautiful column down below. And so with that, your stays don't need to be this big rigid thing. You don't want rigidity. You want that gentle, swaying, romantic vibe. And so with that then, your stays start turning into corsets and start forming into curves, which will then move into using mathematics to create really proper corsets at the turn of the Victorian era, more into going farther into the 19th century. But with that then, if your waistline is right below your chest here and just kind of drapes down, there's no real need to care about really deep cinching the waist and making all this, because you're not going to see any of that. So Regency stays and / corsets, really their focus is on the chest, keeping good posture, so you'll see that there's still a wooden busk in the center to keep you up. So very interesting in that regard. So I do hope you enjoy this, and we will get started on making my long stays. Hello everyone, so as I already mentioned, I will be using the red threaded long Regency stays kit. So nice thing for me is my torso is a fairly average length, so I'm not too worried about the boning channels or any of that part being off. My one thing is that I do fit the large in terms of my waist, but after making a mock-up, I definitely need more cup space, but not necessarily more band space if you're thinking of a modern bra. I am very excited to be using the cotton couture that came with the kit. It feels so amazing. I love it. As well as I've also decided to add a linen twill as my fashion fabric. My thought is that the cotton couture is much stronger and is definitely the strength layer, while the linen is just going to be a really pretty top part, even though it's still quite hefty. It's a 285 grams, so it's dense, it's hefty. Let's get into first modifying the pattern and then cutting up my pieces.
Alright, so here are the pieces right here. Now what I am doing is starting off with the front piece, And this is how I am slightly widening the top of it. I'm just getting another blank paper. As you can see, my easiest one, especially for stuff about this size, is just to get 2 pieces of printer paper and tape them together. Now from there, I am first going to be tracing the initial shape onto my new paper, so as you can see, so that way I can use that as a starter point for later on. Now from here, what I'm going to be doing is extending the top, so I'm going to continue following that curve. I'm just grabbing my ruler, and with my ruler I'm just extending it a couple centimeters wider. That way this piece finishes at the end of my chest rather than cutting kind of in the middle. So with that, then I'm going to be using my ruler to then mark my new piece by putting my measuring tape against the new point and putting it down to the base, effectively making a wider triangle, so to speak. Make sure to add any markings that you may have overdone. So there I'm marking where the grommet for the top of the strap goes, but that is it. Then I just have to cut that out, and then that one's done. For my gussets, this is one of the bust gussets. I really needed to add a good healthy chunk of measurement, and for these, again, same principle. I'm just putting the initial piece, marking that in onto my paper, and then from there I am going to extend it. So on these ones I extend them about a centimeter on either side, so that way the full chest has about 2.5 inches on either side. So yes, marking the 1 centimeter extra. And then for this, I'm just eyeballing because I can use the original curve to assist me on how to properly kind of add it on, and I'm continuing to the same point piece.
Alright everyone, now that those are all finished, I'm going to be flat felling my 2 layers together. So that's the linen twill and the cotton coutil. What this does, flat felling, is it effectively glues the 2 pieces together, so that way as you're working with both materials, they're acting as the same piece. It makes it less likely that one will bunch up or do something funny because they're kind of glued together. Now the way you glue them is by sewing, effectively sewing them together around the very, very edge of them, so past the seam allowance. That way when you're actually sewing the individual parts together, you don't see any of the seams you just made while flat felling. It's pretty simple, especially with this coutil, whatnot. It really holds sturdy. And for this, I have decided to go with a denim needle, and that is because denim needles are intended to be and are made really, really sharp and pointy. And that's going to be good for going through the coutil, which is so dense and thick. It really feels like you're cutting through paper, not fabric, when you're cutting through it. And that will do a lot of good for making sure it's going through properly, as coutil is known for ruining needles. So yeah, I'll show you a little bit about that, and we're on our way. Alright, so I did the last step off of camera, but all it was using, in my case, a zigzag stitch and going around all the edges of the gussets as well as any side piece, just doing the sides. So effectively anything that goes vaguely vertically across your body, that has to get closed up. And that's because when you do the final attachment of these pieces, they're all just out, so you want to finish the seams so they don't start fraying and getting all knotted and gross. My next step is to prepare and insert my gussets into my main panels. So I'm very excited for this, and let's get to it.
Alright, so for cutting out the gussets, as you can see, this is my marking right here. And first thing you're going to want to do is sew a basic line about 3/8 of an inch away on either side. And this will help keep all the fabric secure once you are inserting the gusset, as this portion of it doesn't really get a proper serging or closing. So at the back, I just make sure I've got the space, turn it around, and go back up the other side. Remember, approximately 3/8. These seams aren't seams that are really shown, these are more just to secure the edge. So as you can see this, then I can safely take care of my seam and not have to worry. Alright, from here, once you've done that, then you just cut down the blue lines in my case. So making sure to get as close as you can down to the very tip. So that way you've got these little slits that you will be inserting your gussets into. Following that, you're going to give them a really good iron. So making sure it is super pressed, nice and flat. As you can see, lots of steam coming up from this one. And this is what they look like. So now there are these weird open spaces, and I'm just going to insert my gussets into them. So I like to start by putting a pin right at the very bottom corner, on the point of it, and that way I can make sure that that part stays even and they stay together, and then I just kind of pin slowly going up, making sure to keep approximately with the original angles. You see on some of the gussets that are still showing, you do have the blue line visible on the right side of the fabric, so you use that as a bit of a base for when you're putting your pins in, and then when you sew this down. That is one gusset in place, and we're ready to sew it. So now it is sewn, and we just would do the same thing to all these bust gussets as well as the ones that are in the hips. As you can see, doing that has greatly increased the top, and I love seeing the 3D effect, so to speak. Now here we are moving on. Once you've done all your gussets, moving on to putting the bone casings in. So what's neat about casings is that it's not just a single strip of fabric, it's actually a little tube that you're going to put them in. So just make sure they are folded. I put a little fold at the end of them to make sure the bone stays secure inside. But you effectively just put them on top of where you've done your markings. And then you're going to be sewing them as close to their edge as possible. So as you can see, I like to do just some vertical pins into that. It helps it, for me anyways, lie a bit flatter and straighter. But yeah, so while you're sewing, you want to make sure it is as close to the edge as possible. If you accidentally make your bone channeling too narrow, your bones are going to pass through it, and then that's going to be a bigger pain than it's worth to try to fix. So just make sure you go along the edge and you are set to go for your sewing. You will notice that this bone casing will show the stitches on the other side, so very important that they're neat. So here you can see one that is done and the blue chalk marks on the side that has yet to be done. Now we are moving right along to the busk. I decided to coat it, although I didn't really need to, as this is an underside layer. And once you've folded and sewn the edges in to make a bit of a, almost like a patch pocket, what you're going to be wanting to do is make these eyelets. So as you can see, I'm just showing the placement for where this eyelet hole goes. These will later be used to put the piece of ribbon in to make sure your busk stays in place and doesn't start popping up. I'm sure that'd be very rude at the formal dinner parties of the Regency time if your busk started showing and popping up. But I'm just using my awl to punch a good healthy hole inside of it. The catul and the linen keep it nice and strong, and then I'm going to take my thread and needle and work around small stitches all the way around the hole, being careful when I go through that I am keeping the threads in their supposed to be spot. I'm not accidentally taking threads and moving them around inside the hole. But I just go through the hole and up. This is the simplest way to sew up an eyelet. The whole goal of this is to encase all the threads around the eyelet hole and make sure that they stay nice and in place. Now, I find when I make eyelets, they do slowly get a bit smaller. So one thing you can do is just wiggle your awl in and make sure the hole stays about the same size. You have to remember an awl doesn't tear and make a hole, it just spreads out the threads. So here it is all finished. You can see the pocket has been put in and you can see the stitches. So again, always be careful to make sure that all this stays nice and neat. And you can see me putting the busk in. Just always good to double check and make sure everything fits and has just enough room.
Hello all, I'm just in the other room for a little bit. Obviously it's been a new day, and so from this point what you've seen is effectively putting the main pieces and prepping them, in the sense that the gussets are on to the chest and for the beginnings of the hips. We also have put on the bone casing, so just sewing where those need to be sewn, as well as prepping for the busk. The next step then is putting everything together. So this is putting the main front piece to the sides to the back, getting that really going, and so from here the stays are just going to go flying and they're suddenly going to look like stays next time you see my face. Very excited about that. Now from this part it really is going to be, for the most part, right sides to right sides sewn together and then iron out flat, and nice solid simple sewing for that part. But I will go into detail showing you how I go about inserting the last two gussets, as they go kind of between a seam rather than making a seam and kind of splitting the fabric for them, which isn't that difficult to process. It's a bit finicky. So same with same with the other ones as well, I guess. Just take your time and get rolling on them. So far I found the pattern and instructions really good. If you know how to sew a little bit, you should be fine. I don't recommend it thus far for like a brand new beginner. There's a lot of stuff where they kind of brush over it, and there's not that many pictures for you to be able to kind of go like, I don't know what this definition is, I don't know what this definition is, but you can kind of see with the picture, like it really is. You have to have had some sewing experience before you get working on this project. That being said, if there's ever, whenever you're sewing something you don't know what it means, there is definitely 1,000 videos already on YouTube that show you exactly how to do that. So yeah, now on to assembly. This is what everything looks like currently, with all the pieces beside each other, and soon we're going to start putting them all together. So it's nice to sometimes lay out the pieces as well as number them as a way to make sure that you are not sewing something upside down accidentally.
here I am doing the one hip gusset that you saw that doesn't get placed inserted properly. So with this one, when you do your gussets, you start by sewing it onto one side of your main fabric, so I have it attached to the front piece. And whenever you're working with this sort of thing, just remember that when you're doing the sewing, you're only sewing within the seam allowance. So once that's sewn in, as you can see, I'm only working within the seam allowance of this, so there's a little bit of a floppy top and bottom corners. So once those both are on the front, then I do the exact same thing onto the side, whereby I put them right side to right side together, and I sew from the bottom corners, and I try to match up the peaks at the very top, but not continuing any farther. So I just go from the seat where the blue markings are from one side all the way down to the other. Now once those are on, that's 2 out of 3 steps complete, so you can see I have a bit of a gap in the middle. And so from here, what I do is I go from my pieced corner and I sew from there where my thumb is all the way up. Now that is complete. Fairly simple process, just to make sure you're taking your time and making sure you're really precise with your stitches. Now it's okay that I've got a fuzzy raggedy edge. I purposely left a bit of extra space knowing the linen would fray a bit. So when I get to doing the bias, I'm going to be cleaning that up so it is ready to go. Here you can see the gusset, how it opens up on that hip we were just talking about. So I'm going to be ironing all these seams down as they will be slowly turned into boning channels. Now, last thing is our side goes to the back. So again, following on the sewing on the blue line. This is now preparing the back. So the way this works for the boning channels is you've got a lot of extra fabric that gets folded back, and then once it is folded back, what you're going to want to do is pin it down in place, as I am currently. Then you make vertical stitches going up the back at various increments of approximately maybe 4/8, 5/8 difference, and these will become the 2 boning channels, as well as between the 2 boning channels you're gonna have the space for your eyelets. So you can see that is all complete, and now it is time for that ironing. With the ironing all complete, we are going to be turning our seam allowances into boning channels. So just make sure you're ironed nice and flat, and then sew away approximately 5/8 away from where your first seam was. For the bias tape, you want to take your my case linen fabric, turn it into a square. So that's what I'm doing right here, because when I fold it like this, it makes it so that way the two diagonal sides are equal. Finding those scissors. So the excess fabric that you see sticking out on the right is going to go away soon. So we're going to snip that off. And now I have a perfect square to work with. Now what I'm doing here is just doing a quick, gentle hand press. Nice thing about linen is it's very easy just to pinch down like paper in your fingers. But when I open this up, you'll see that I have a nice, very convenient marking at 45 degrees. So I'm going to use now my measuring and my chalk, and with my measuring board, I'm going to measure at 2 inches away from that line. And just keep going down my fabric. Doing about 2 inches away. And that's because once I fold in the edges, the 2 inches, once folded, turns into 1 inch. For what I'm going to be making the single fold bias tape. Now, once I'm done, I just keep going along making my 2-inch folds, getting ever so slowly closer to the tip. So you can see that's all done, the blue lines right there. And now it's time to cut those out. Excellent. Once all that's cut out, you've got all this spaghetti of strips of fabric, which now you have to sew together. So this is what the sewn looks like. So the trick is, again, it has to do with the seam allowances, but when you have the tips stick out like that, what ends up meaning is that it folds nicely into an even strip. So this is what it looks like all folded up, so my spaghetti is getting all the better. And now is ready to be put onto my stays. So I've done the bottom here, as you can see, so it looks quite nice. So, and with the top. So the top is a little different than the bottom in that you do have to insert a piece of ribbon into it. So you go from the front pieces and around the bust on one side, string sticks out, and then also on the other side. So it's not all the way around, just a little. Now we're going to the very last bit. It's getting those eyelet holes in. So I've decided to do and follow along with the original pattern and doing 10 holes on either side, and I have them evenly spaced out, so this is not spiral lacing. As you can see, just doop doop doop, getting those blue spots on. And to make my eyelets the same way as I did again is I give a very, very strong, sturdy punch through. I get a nice good hole like that. And just like the eyelets for the bust, I'm going to be sewing those, but the trick is, for this, I want to make sure these are extra strong and sturdy. So I have my beeswax. By wrapping it in beeswax, the thread it turns almost into like teeth flossing floss. It gives it a bit of a stronger hold, and the wax helps coat it and protect it, because this will have a lot of wear and tear, as this is where the tension from tying the stays up will go. I also am a bit of a fiend for knots, So I like making good, thick, large knots, especially on something like this.
Alright, and with that we are essentially finished. So now that the eyelets have all been done, so that's 10 on each side of the back, as well as a one attaching the shoulder strap to the front on either side, I have off camera decided to do the lacing. I used the satin ribbon that the kit came with, which was wonderful, as for both the back, and there was enough left over for the fronts. Alright, so I thought I'd show you my work. Here they are. See the front? It's a bright white. Hopefully my next project is in white, so you can actually see what I'm up to. So I'm very excited. You can see front. This is the back. I'll give you some better shots in just a moment. Very happy with how these turned out. They're incredibly comfortable to wear. I've had these finished now for a couple days. We've just been doing some other stuff, so haven't had a chance to film this little last bit until just now. But I'm very excited for them. What I love about these is with the wooden busk, which again came with the kit. So last step is as you're putting it on to just slip that in. So it's nice and sturdy. You can see it holds itself right there. And I like to put that on as I'm kind of already in the corset because I have to shimmy myself in this way. So I just kind of like an overly tight top, shimmy it on, and I will show you what it looks like. But I'm very pleased with the results. Things that I would like to work forward on for next time. When I'm wearing it, the hips are just a tiny bit too wide on me. So it's fine, funny enough, it's fine right after the waist where I added the increase in the gussets, but I almost needed to thin back down again for the base. You can't tell at all when I'm wearing my shift, and it means that when I'm sitting it doesn't dig in. But just, yeah, it's maybe a centimeter on either side could be reduced. But yeah, so other than that, I'm really pleased with them. Yeah, they're incredibly comfortable to wear. Very excited about that. But I will get going and showing you the final results. Alright everyone, and so with that, this is what the stays look like. So as you can see, I do have a bit more curve here than what the Regency period would traditionally have, but I do have my hip bones right there, so I do need to make sure that there's room for those. I can't exactly squish my hips, but I'm quite proud of these. So as you can see, they fit pretty well. Turning around here, show a bit of the back. Now I don't have the back fully finished, decided yet, so ignore my lacing pattern in the back. It's not accurate. It's not intended to be. It's just want to get it on, see how they feel, and I'm a little torn if I want to do the satin lacing that's currently there, or if I want to go for a corded cotton. We'll see how longevity holds for these. But yes, they're quite nice. There's my little straps right there. We're all quite pleased.